I talk to my clients about this all the time. That is a sign of maturity as you advance in your career as well, is when you do pick up these levels of responsibilities, these roles and responsibilities that are increasing. It's important that you put a cap on it. It's important that you create boundaries and that you don't let people overload you with things that you don't, feel like you can handle. That's a part of a sign of maturity. You've got to be able to have these tough conversations.
What tends to happen for a lot of folks is if you get selected for a project where you kind of become that go-to, you get selected for every project. Like every time there's something that comes up, you are the go-to for it. And you can very easily get stretched too thin or have way too much put on your plate. But I think a lot of folks are hesitant to push back against that and say, hey, listen, I've had enough. I got to pause here. I got too much going on, or I got to take something away for fear of losing out on future opportunities. My name is Fela Abioye, and this is How to Corporate, my digital show dedicated to helping you identify what's holding you back so you can advance your career. Are you ready for today's topic? Well, let's get started. Welcome back again, guys, to How to Corporate. Super excited to have you for sure. Remember, the mission, the purpose, our cause is to empower you, the working professional, so that you can better advance your career through other people's experiences. So with that, I'm super excited today to introduce my guest. She has a very diverse background. She speaks specifically to a very niche group, and she does career coaching and financial literacy for single parents. And super excited to have her on the show today. So with that said, Crystal, do you mind introducing yourself and briefly sharing a little bit about yourself for the folks listening?
Sure. So my name is Crystal Smith, and thank you so much for having me today. I love what you're doing, so I'm so happy to be here. So my name is Crystal Smith. I am an accountant by trade. So during the day, I am a cost analyst, but after the day is done, I get to indulge in my passion and my purpose, which is my business, Six Figure Single Mom, where I'm a career coach and strategist, helping other single parents when they want to advance in their careers. So I help them get their finances as well as their careers organized so that they gain clarity in those areas. I got my bachelor's from Sam Houston State University, and then I got my master's from Texas Southern University. So that's just a little bit about myself. Also, I have a daughter. She's a 15-year-old daughter. So we're in the sophomore year and gearing up for those expenses as well.
Expenses for sure. I definitely remember that time. Going back to my parents very often for money. I feel your pain right now. So, but your focus, around career coaching and financial literacy is on single parents, and you've made that really a target audience for yourself. And I'm curious of what inspired that.
Yes, that's correct. So I am a single mom, and I wanted to focus on single parents because I realized that there was a gap. Right. So when I was in college, I became a single mom at the end of my junior year. And even then, it was hard for me to get any type of assistance. I was a single mom early on. So initially, those finances started adding up. My one check was now divided by two people. And so when I was seeking out for help, I realized that unless you are under the poverty line, you're really not going to get any help financially from the system. So that's when it clicked to me that, wow, you've got to really kick this into gear. You've got to utilize your education. So I started to strategize about how I could align my finances with this newfound life that I have. But I started to realize throughout the years that if I was needing this assistance, that other people might need this assistance as well in these areas of career. And so I always said that if I was going to start a business or do anything entrepreneurial, that it would have to be something that I'm extremely passionate about. So I always like the underdogs being served. And so I kind of consider the forgotten community of single parents underserved. And so it's a way for me to serve my community because I'm a part of the community as well.
It takes a village, right? Is what they say. And
Absolutely.
when you're a village of one, that makes it even harder, right? So finding balance between career and work and family. I mean, I think honestly, most people who are career oriented struggle with that in some way, shape, or fashion. So I've got a two-part question here. How do you define work balance for yourself, and how do you think work balance is is really attainable? Or is it an attainable thing? Because we hear about that all the time about finding work balance, but I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if that's a real thing. But so, two-part question: how do you define work balance for yourself, and do you think work balance is really a attainable thing, or work-life balance?
Sure. So I define work-life balance as creating those systems in your life to where you can manage work and your home life. Your second part of the question is, do I think work-life balance is attainable? Absolutely, some days, and absolutely not other days, right? So your
Yep.
systems may work one day, but the next day it may not. But I always like to talk to people about organized chaos. So sometimes that's what I consider is organized chaos. So it's everything going on at one time and just managing all those things to the best of your ability. So some days I have work, I have meetings, I have travel. My daughter has a dance competition or things like that. And I've got to manage it all because I can't let anything fall through the cracks. And some days it's like that, so I call it more of organized chaos, but just creating those systems that help those things to flow a little bit better. Everything may not get 100%, but I think showing up is half the battle. So just showing up and giving your best is what I like to focus on. The work-life balance thing, like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but I think you should at least try and push for it. So in my life, that's what I push for. And I'm okay functioning within the organized chaos realm, right? Because the main word for me there is organized. As long as it's organized, I'm okay with it.
That's a really excellent point. Kind of a bit of organized chaos because you have so many things happening in your life constantly, whether it be at work or personally, or with a child, or if you got multiple children, right? So, but recognizing that some days will be better than others, right? Some days it will feel like, man, I got a really good day and I've got a great balance, and others you wind up putting in a lot of hours at work, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think to your point of feeling like you can wake up every day and still keep trying and still keep going, where you don't feel exhausted constantly. I think that's a big element there too, because there's so many focuses and studies around work-life balance, but that's where I find a little bit of skepticism about it. Is I don't know if that's a real thing, right? I think I like the way you put it, the organized chaos is always a little bit of it, and you're going to stretch and pull and move up and down, and you just kind of got to roll with the punches. So, but as long as you can wake up every day and keep going, then I think that's the balance that you find. So,
Yep. And everybody's balance is different, right? So your balance may be different from mine, but I think the personalized piece there and the individualized piece is that we all at least strive for this work-life balance that we talk about. But like I said, some days it works and some days it doesn't work, and you just learn how to pivot and work through it.
For sure. So, my next question, as one moves up the corporate ladder, the demand on your time tends to increase, right? With responsibility, you take on, bigger roles, etc., which I think for a lot of people can sometimes be a large barrier for folks. How do you coach people that are very capable and want to move up, but don't have the additional time to actually give? Hey, if you're enjoying what you're hearing and learning something new, take a second to rate this episode and write a review. Oh, don't forget to share with a friend or a colleague. All right, back to the show.
What I've learned in my career personally is that, you know, you have to be able to is that the more I've moved up, the more knowledge I've gained, the more experience I've gained, and the more expertise I've gained. So I work with my clients on strategizing and making that work to their advantage. So I work in the project industry, in oil and gas. And sometimes when I talk to the guys in the field, I talk to them about, okay, you guys have an 8 to 10 week duration on said item, right? So week one is going to be a little shaky because there's some new guys on the team. And so, you're going to have to train them up on what to do. But as the weeks go by, your productivity, my anticipation is that your productivity should be improving over that 8 to 10 week duration so that we can save a week. So, that's kind of how I like to look at it with my clients as well, is the more you move up, find more ways to be time efficient. Find more ways to manage your time. That time management should be kicking in as well so that you are gaining the freedom and flexibility that you need in order to have this said life that you want. I mean, the more you move up, I feel like there should be a little bit of freedom and flexibility there as well. You should be able to say, hey, I got this soccer game. I know that I'm needed here, but you should also know what you need in order to either prepare yourself before the soccer game for your child, or you should know what you need to do after the soccer game in order to make up that time.
Right. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is finding ways to create efficiencies, right?
Yeah.
So, it makes me think of something I talk about with my wife often is she pushes me on, before you pick something up, you need to put something down.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm going to look to maybe stretch myself here or pick up a new responsibility, or I want to add something to my plate because I want to learn something, etc. Right. Okay. How can I put something down? Right. Yeah. So, and that's a part of the creating efficiencies, because at the end of the day, right, our plates can get very full very, very quickly. And, our focus today is about family and balancing work and home. And so, when your kids' life, they get older and they become active in sports and things of that nature, you got to find ways to put other things down, right, in order to supplement for that time that you've got to, dedicate towards home, while also still being active and, and being able to deliver results within your career. So, that was kind of the takeaway that I heard from that, which I think is a good one. At the end of the day, is find a way to create efficiencies for sure. So,
yeah. And like you said, you have to find ways to create efficiency without your performance lacking. So you still got to deliver the same level of value, but creating these efficiencies, you have to be extremely intentional about it. And your wife is right. Don't pick up one other thing without putting something down. So I always have these talks at work with my managers. I actually got selected to be a part of another assignment or side project that she's working on. And I'm always very intentional and clear whenever I'm pulled aside for these things, because, I get pulled aside for side projects all the time. And I always tell them, if I ever feel like my performance is going to lack in this other area, or these deliverables that I always have, please be prepared for that conversation, right? Because communication is key in those instances also.
Okay. Got you. So pretty much being clear when you feel like, I can't give 100%, for
Yes.
one reason or another, or, hey, listen, I'm not gonna be able to hit this deliverable for X, Y, and Z. So I think that's a really, really important takeaway in your career, is being honest and upfront about expectations, right? Because when people put you they select you for projects or put you in positions of power, and if you don't deliver, but you don't say anything, and you got a lot of things going on, maybe personally or, work wise, and, you're not going to always get that same grace if you had not spoke up beforehand, right? If you had spoke up beforehand, there's a certain level of grace that you get versus, kind of falling, or there's a fire now and you kind of fall flat in your face. And, now you kind of become like, oh, well, you didn't really step up the way you were supposed to. So,
right. And as we talk about family, right, your wife is not expecting you to do everything without having some of those days where you can't communicate that something has taken precedence, right? So communication is key. It's the same within the organization. I talk to my clients about this all the time. That is a sign of maturity as you advance in your career as well, is when you do pick up these levels of responsibilities, these roles and responsibilities that are increasing, it's important that you put a cap on it. It's important that you create boundaries and that you don't let people overload you with things that you don't, feel like you can handle. That's a part of a sign of maturity. You've got to be able to have these tough conversations.
That's a very excellent way to put it. It's funny because I remember very early in my career, what tends to happen for a lot of folks is if you get selected for a project where you kind of become that go-to, you get selected for every project. Like every time there's something that comes up, you are the go-to for it. And you can very easily get stretched too thin or have way too much put on your plate. But I think a lot of folks are hesitant to push back against that and say, hey, listen, I've had enough. I got to pause here. I got too much going on, or I got to take something away for fear of losing out on future opportunities. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and to your point, I think it takes a certain level of maturity to recognize that, listen, I have other responsibilities outside of A, B, and C. And if you want me to give my full performance or execute on these things completely, well, then you have to understand that there's a limit to what you can ask me to do. And I think that's something that people struggle with. So at every aspect of their career, whether you're a parent or not, or, married or whatever the case may be. So I think that's an excellent point of having that upfront conversation.
And at this point, in your career, whether you're beginning, whether you're mid-level, whether you are executive leadership, you should be able to have that conversation, and your manager or your leader should know your capabilities, and they should know that you're not just saying that you can't do it because you just want to slack off. They know that if you can't do this, then you really can't do it, and they will keep you in mind for future side projects. I'm never intimidated to tell someone that I can't do anything, because if my name is on it, it needs to have some level of value. I had a review the other day, and one of the points that my manager made was that you do everything excellent, and we can tell as an organization. So for me, that was important. He said, we can tell as an organization that excellence is the standard, right? So if I turn down a side project, they know that it's because I can't deliver that level of excellence that Crystal will want to deliver. So I push others and my clients and anyone around me to just deliver value. Whenever you are in any setting, just deliver value, and people will appreciate those conversations.
That's well said. I was thinking about this last year for myself and thinking about travel. Right now, that kind of comes into play with work, and I've had honestly probably the most travel I've ever had in my career this past year. And now that I've got a little girl, I'm way more conscious about that travel and how it plays a factor. And luckily, my wife and I, we make it work, but not everybody has that luxury. So I'm curious of how you've coached maybe single parents that may want to seek out roles that require a fair amount of travel, but they may be restricted or they may not be. Or have you ever been held back from progressing your career because of lack of inability to travel? Because being able to get on the road and do all those things, right, when you got a 2-parent household, at least in the same house or the same city or whatever, right, that's just it's easier to do, honestly, right, when you don't. And so you got to coordinate way more things if you're a single parent. And so just curious around if you've ran into that and how you've coached people through it. Hey, if you're enjoying what you're hearing and learning something new, take a second to rate this episode and write a review. Oh, don't forget to share with a friend or a colleague. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, so I've run into that many times in my career. I've actually moved for work so that I can go and work in these plants or on these project sites. So during that time, my daughter and I, we actually moved. It was really hard, honestly speaking, because my family is my support system. So my parents and my sisters, those are my internal network. They are the ones that help me out a lot. So there was a lot of trips home when I didn't want to go home. And it was Louisiana, so it was very close to home. So it was drivable. But it was going home on the weekends, even though I was tired from a 50-hour work week. This is what I had to do to make sure that my daughter still had these foundational things in her life that I felt were important. Sometimes as a parent, when you're dealing with family and career, you really have to bite the bullet. And you also have to have your long-term and short-term goals always at the forefront of why you're doing things. So when people say know your why, this is what they mean, knowing your why. So short-term, I knew, hey, when I moved to these project sites, I strategically planned to do it when my daughter was younger. So she wasn't in like high school or even middle school. These were all things that we did from elementary and before. Well, when she got in middle school, I then said, I don't want to be in the project sites anymore. I took work trips, but I started to take work trips during the week. So instead of actually working in a live plan and actually moving to the sites or moving where the site locations are, I started to take work trips during the week. Whenever I have a work trip and we know from being in our careers and on our jobs, there's a little buzz about problem areas at the sites, right? Or problem areas of why the travel is needed. So whenever these conversations start up, I am definitely starting to text or call my internal network after work to say, hey, I need coverage. This is the time that they're thinking. It may not be this specific time, but I'm just putting it out there that I need help. Covering, watching my daughter. So I always encourage people, again, keep the communication open when there is travel. There has been some weeks that it was a little bit harder than others because of what I had going on. But I just worked through those. Like I said, it's all about working through the organized chaos. So setting up those systems that help you to flow effortlessly is what I always aim for.
That makes a lot of sense. Communicating often and early is
Yes.
what I got out of that, right? Whether it be within your own network and also even, within your career, right? When, like you mentioned, those conversations start to pop up saying, okay, I think we got to make a trip. We got to make this. If you know that's not going to work for you, right? Hey, put it out there. So, hey, does it have to happen on this day? Can we maybe shift it to X, Y, and Z date, right? So, anytime I personally have looked to get a meeting together, I know I got to travel. I don't wait for the other person to suggest dates. I'm always suggesting the dates, right? Because I'm suggesting dates that work for me. So, right. So I'm hopeful that it also works for them too. So, so when you are proactive in that way, right, you can hopefully more often than not get things to fit in your schedule when you can. Not to say it's 100%, right? It's not always going to work out that way, but when you communicate often, proactive with it, then hopefully you're able to make it work. So that makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, and there's been some times that even as a single parent, I've had to my job. They overly understand, right, because of the value I bring the organization. So sometimes if I say, well, if you guys want me to travel a week, I can't do a week this week. However, I can do half of a week, and preferably, like you said, I'm bringing up preferably the first half of the week so that I can spend the second half of the week with my daughter. So just communicating early and often your desires and putting out there what you can do. That's a part of also creating those boundaries that I talked about earlier. You're saying, hey, the boundaries for my family time is that I don't spend the duration of the week. I can do half of the week, right? And the more we are in our fields, in our careers, the more efficient we should become. So we should be able to get this work done in half a week if we need to do that.
I always ask all my guests about these things, about setbacks and the career challenges that we face, because, it's not all just sunshine and rainbows, right? So there are all types of pitfalls that we tend to go through. So I'm curious about yourself when you think back to your career. What's maybe one of the most challenging things or setbacks that you've had in your career that you had to kind of overcome?
So I'd say when I first began in the project world, I was green. the person that recruited me to come and work in the project industry. So I then went from the corporate side to the execution side, to the operations side. So this is where the work actually happens in the field. And when I did this transition, the person that recruited me passed away. So all the things that we had talked about, all the being green and things like that, that kind of fell through the cracks. So the people that I landed in their hands, they were thinking, you don't have any experience in this. What's going on? They didn't know that this guy recruited me because some of the people that were in this field were doing things wrong. So his reason for recruiting me was because he could then train me to be exactly who he wanted me to be and learn how to do things the correct way. So it was very hard for me because then I went from being excited about being green to being made to feel like I didn't know what I was doing. Well, no, I didn't know what I was doing because I didn't have any experience doing said thing. And this was literally after I got my master's degree. And so there was a transition period that was really rough for me because I am an overachiever and I do like to perform well. So there was a lot of bumps and bruises with that. I actually went and worked on a project site. And those of us, they started to downsize the project team because the project kind of started going south a little bit. So I was one of the ones that was chosen to be sent back to the corporate office, still within my position, but just doing what I do from the corporate office because there are many perks to working in the field financially. And so that was kind of a setback for me. I took it as a loss at the time, but over time, I stuck with it. So it's not anything that I said I couldn't overcome. It was something that I began to say, okay, well, little by little, I'm going to start to understand the project world holistically. So I need to know what things mean. I need to know how to do things. I started reading through project documents. I started allowing people to mentor me. I started seeking out mentors that were in this field that I could learn from. And over time, I learned it. So that was the biggest setback for me, which was his passing, because this guy was a mentor, immediately became a mentor. He was someone that I didn't know, but someone that a former mentor had connected me with. So his passing was very untimely. And it was hard for me to navigate through that, but I did it.
It's an unfortunate situation. I think it happens where, you get recruited or you get brought on, by a manager or somebody within an organization, and then somehow they leave or they're not here anymore. Right. And so then your name essentially is tied to them to some degree. And so, and the next person that may take over may or may not necessarily agree with the decision that they made. Right. And you may not necessarily align exactly with them. So how do you kind of work through that? How do you balance through that? So I think that's a really good example of being able to persevere and figuring it out nonetheless. So awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So as we kind of bring this to a close, I did want to kind of maybe take a second for anybody who's maybe listening and thinking like, man, I can really relate to your story. Any words of encouragement or actions that you feel like that they could take to really persevere as they work through their careers as a single parent?
Yeah, I would first say have the confidence and believe in yourself to know that you can do whatever said thing is. A lot of times when we become single parents, it's a blow, right? Because no one anticipates that. I always tell people no one says when they're a little child, when I grow up, I want to be a single parent, but life happens. So we learn how to persevere. We learn how to work through it. But I would just say to these people, believe in yourself, get the experience, knowledge, and education that you need in order to go after these goals that you set for yourself, both short term as well as long term. Find a mentor that can speak to your abilities and that can help develop your abilities as well. Find a coach that can help you with your professional development, and also find you a sponsor within the organization that can speak to who you are professionally and your character whenever you're not in a room. And lean on your internal network, and don't ever be afraid to ask for help. Over communicate early and often those things that you need, as well as those things that you want as well.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Crystal. You've been great. This has been an awesome episode. I did want to make sure I left an opportunity for you to share your contact information about, and you got a podcast as well, and a whole coaching business. I want to make sure leave the floor for you to kind of share that for the folks listening to.
Yeah, so my podcast is called So You're a Single Parent Now What? I talk all things career, lifestyle, as well as single parenting. You can find me on YouTube under Six Figure Single Mom. I'd love for you to, anyone out there listening that can relate or anyone that feels like there was some good points hit today, to follow the page. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn as Crystal Smith, MBA. Also, my business page is Six Figure Single Mom here on LinkedIn, on the platform for LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as at the Six Figure Single Mom. So I know sometimes we hang out on Instagram as well. I still drop a lot of tools and tips and knowledge on Instagram so that I am serving that community there as well. During the year, I'm throwing a lot of events. So you can find those events on my website at www.sixfiguresinglemom.com. And if you want to send me an email, my email address is sixfiguresinglemoms with an S at gmail.com.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Definitely, guys. I'll share all that in the show notes, so you guys have that there. But appreciate you for listening. Until next time, peace. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For more content, click the link in my bio to follow How to Corporate on all social media platforms. Until next time, keep building.